My name is Chloe, and I was 16 when my mother ditched me at the airport. I can still picture her faint, dismissive gesture, the way she pressed $300 into my hand before turning her back on me to walk away with her new husband and his perfect children. That moment, standing alone at Terminal C Gate 11, demolished everything I thought I understood about family, about love. What I never could have imagined was how that single act of brutal betrayal would set me on a path to uncovering the truth about my past, and in doing so, completely remake my future. Before I get into how I went from being abandoned at Gate 11 to finding where I truly belonged, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Believe me, you'll want to hear what happened when my mother came home to find my room stripped bare. The memories I have of my earliest years with my mom were, for the most part, good ones. I remember Saturdays at the local playground where she'd push me on the swing so high, my stomach would do flips with a giddy kind of fear. For my 6th birthday, she baked a wonderfully lopsided chocolate cake and filled our small apartment with streamers she'd made herself from construction paper. We never had a lot of money, but we had each other, and at the time, that felt like more than enough. The world tilted on its axis when I was 8. I walked in from school one afternoon to see my parents perched on opposite ends of our worn-out sofa, looking like strangers. The air in the room was so thick with unspoken things it was hard to breathe. They told me they were getting a divorce. Their explanation was a bland, generic line about how sometimes adults just fall out of love, which only left me drowning in questions. I remember crying into my pillow that night, clutching my worn stuffed bunny as the muffled sound of their fighting seeped through my bedroom wall. My mom got primary custody, and my dad just faded. His visits went from every other weekend to once a month, then to sporadic phone calls that felt increasingly stilted and short. By the time I turned 10, he was little more than a name on my birth certificate and a ghost in my memory. Life in a single-parent home wasn't easy. My mom juggled 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads, waitressing by day and cleaning corporate offices by night. I got used to heating up my own microwave dinners and letting myself into our empty apartment with the key I wore on a cord around my neck. But even with the financial strain, there was a kind of predictable rhythm to our life. I knew the rules, I knew what she expected from me, and I never, ever doubted that I was the absolute center of her universe. When I was 13, the world tilted again. My mom met Mark at the restaurant she worked at. He was a wealthy real estate developer who always left huge tips and made a point of asking to be seated in her section. I still remember the first time she brought him up, her cheeks flushed with a kind of excitement I hadn't seen in years, as she described his expensive watch and the way he looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the room. Their relationship moved at lightning speed. In less than 6 months, Mark had proposed with a diamond ring that was so big it looked almost comical on my mother's work-worn hand. Before I could even wrap my head around the idea of a stepfather, we were packing our few belongings and moving into his massive suburban mansion, a place with a swimming pool, a home theater, and more bathrooms than I could keep track of. The house, of course, came with its own set of inhabitants, Mark's 3 children from his first marriage. Sophia was 14, a year older than me, and wore a permanent expression of bored disdain that made me feel small and out of place the second I met her. Liam, who was 12, was quiet and reclusive, barely registering my presence. The youngest, Maya, was 10 and seemed friendly at first, but that warmth vanished almost as soon as we were all living under the same roof. From day one, it was painfully obvious that I was the odd piece in this pre-assembled family puzzle. Mark was civil, but distant, saving his genuine warmth and affection for his own kids. Family dinners became an exercise in quiet discomfort. Mark and my mom would talk about private schools, country club events, and trips to their vacation home, topics from a life I had never known. Whenever I tried to contribute something about my school or a book I was reading, I'd get a few polite nods before the conversation inevitably swerved back to Sophia's debate team. Victories, or Liam's latest coding project. What hurt the most, though, was watching my mom change. The woman who used to meticulously clip coupons and brag about a good find on the clearance rack was now casually discussing designer labels and five-star restaurants. She started getting her hair professionally colored, whitened her teeth, and began referring to our old life as the struggle years, always with a slightly embarrassed laugh, especially when Mark's friends were over. It felt like she was desperately trying to shed her old skin, and in the process, she was shedding the part of herself that was connected to me. I tried so hard to fit in with my new step-siblings. I offered to help Sophia with her algebra, told Maya her drawings were amazing, and asked Liam about the video games he was always playing. My efforts were usually met with a cool politeness, or more often, a flat-out dismissal. One memory that still stings is the time I overheard Sophia on the phone with a friend, complaining that her dad's new wife came with a charity case attached. She meant me. As summer approached, Mark announced a big family vacation to Fiji, 2 weeks at a 5-star resort with private bungalows and personal butlers. Even with the growing chasm between my mom and me, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this trip, away from our normal lives, would be a chance for us to finally connect as a family. That hope was extinguished pretty quickly when my mom took her new stepchildren on a massive shopping spree for vacation clothes and didn't include me. When I asked her why, she just waved a hand dismissively and said I already had plenty of clothes, even though most of what I owned was from our life before Mark. I ended up using my babysitting money to buy myself a new swimsuit, a plain, modest one-piece that looked drab and cheap next to the designer bikinis Sophia and Maya would be packing. A week before we were supposed to leave, I overheard a conversation between my mother and Mark that made my stomach twist into a knot. They were in their bedroom, the door left slightly ajar, and they didn't know I was walking past on my way to get a glass of water. "What about the arrangements for Chloe?" Mark asked, his voice low. "It's all handled," my mother replied, her tone so casual and dismissive it made me feel sick. "She won't be an issue." When I tried to ask her about it later, she just brushed it off with a breezy, "Oh, just trip logistics, honey. Nothing you need to worry about." The morning of the flight was a whirlwind of frantic energy and excitement. The house was buzzing as suitcases were hauled out to Mark's enormous SUV. I noticed my passport wasn't in the neat stack of travel documents on the kitchen island, but when I pointed it out to my mom, she just mumbled something about having it in her purse and hustled me towards the door. Looking back, the signs were all there. The way my mother wouldn't quite meet my eyes on the drive to the airport. The way no one talked about my seat on the plane while they were all arguing over who would get the window. The fact that my suitcase was mysteriously smaller and lighter than everyone else's. But at 16, so desperate to believe I was wanted, I silenced the alarm bells screaming in my head. The international terminal was a chaotic blur of hurried travelers, rolling luggage, and stressed-out airline employees. Mark navigated our group through the chaos with an air of practiced ease, my mom clinging to his arm, clutching her expensive handbag. Sophia, Liam, and Maya followed right behind them, their faces glowing with excitement. I trailed behind, struggling to keep up with my small suitcase. When we got to the check-in desk, Mark handed over a stack of passports and the reservation details to the agent. I counted them. 5 passports, not 6. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach as I watched the agent print out boarding passes and hand one to every single person in my family, except for me. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely a whisper as I stepped forward. "I think you missed my boarding pass." The airline agent gave me a confused look. "I'm sorry. I only have 5 passengers listed for this flight." Mark cleared his throat. "Your mother needs to talk to you about that. We'll go on ahead to security." As Mark and his kids moved away with the luggage cart, my mom pulled me by the elbow over to a quiet corner near a newsstand. Her face was a mask I'd never seen before, a bizarre combination of total detachment and mild irritation. "Listen, Chloe," she said, her voice unnaturally steady. There's been a small change of plans. You're not coming with us to Fiji." The words felt like a physical slap. "What? Why? Did I do something?" She let out an exasperated sigh, her eyes darting over to where Mark and the others were waiting by the security line. "Mark feels this trip should be just for the family. A chance for us to really bond." "But I am family," I choked out, my voice cracking. "You're mature for your age, Chloe. You'll be fine." Tears started to well up in my eyes as the full, crushing weight of what was happening slammed into me. "Mom, please. You can't do this to me." "Mark is waiting," she said, looking nervously towards the security checkpoint again. "This vacation is important for our future, Chloe. We all have to make sacrifices sometimes." "A sacrifice is giving up a concert ticket, not abandoning your child," I shot back, anger finally cutting through the shock. She actually flinched at the word abandoned, but recovered quickly. "Don't be so dramatic. It's only 2 weeks. The fridge is full, and I left some pizza money for you in the kitchen drawer." She leaned in, planted a quick, dry kiss on my forehead, and said, "I'll call you when we land." And just like that, she turned and walked away. The sharp click-clack of her expensive heels on the polished airport floor echoed as she went to rejoin Mark and her new family. I watched, completely numb, as they all went through the security line. My mother never looked back, not even once. Sophia caught my eye for a split second and gave me a smug little smirk before they all disappeared from view. I stood there, frozen, the $300 clutched in my shaking hand. All around me, the airport hummed with its usual rhythm, travelers rushing to their gates, families sharing tearful goodbyes, announcements echoing through the vast space. But for me, time had stopped. The sheer scale of my mother's betrayal was just beginning to sink in. The tears came suddenly, hot and fast, streaming down my face as I collapsed onto a nearby bench. A few people shot me curious or pitying glances, but nobody stopped. In a busy airport, a crying teenager is just part of the scenery, easily ignored and just as quickly forgotten. I spent the next hour in a fog, my eyes glued to the departure board as their flight status ticked from boarding to departed. Every update was another twist of the knife. I called my mother's cell phone over and over, but every call went straight to voicemail. My texts showed up as delivered, but went unanswered. "Having fun at the airport?" I finally typed, my anger momentarily eclipsing the hurt. "Hope ditching your daughter was worth the first-class seats." No reply, not that I expected one. By now, she'd be settling into her plush seat, probably sipping champagne next to Mark, feeling relieved that she'd finally shed the last piece of her old life, me. As the afternoon bled into evening, my situation felt more and more desperate. An airport security officer eventually approached me while I was nursing a soda I'd bought just to have an excuse to sit at a table in the food court. "Everything all right, miss?" he asked, his expression a mix of official suspicion and human concern. "You've been here for a while." "I'm waiting for my ride," I lied, staring down at the table. "They're stuck in traffic." He didn't look convinced, but he just nodded and moved on, reminding me not to leave my bag unattended. A fresh wave of shame washed over me. How could I possibly admit that my own mother had just abandoned me? The words were stuck in my throat, trapped by a toxic blend of humiliation and some stupid, lingering sense of loyalty. As the evening crowds started to thin out and the shops began pulling down their metal gates, the reality of my predicament became impossible to ignore. The $300 wouldn't last forever, and even if I could get a taxi back to Mark's house, I didn't have a key. 6 hours had passed since my mom walked away. I had drifted from one uncomfortable bench to another, watching happy families and couples setting off on their adventures, each one a painful reminder of my own isolation. My phone battery was getting dangerously low, adding a new layer of panic to the mix. Around 8 p.m., I found an airport diner that was still open. I took a seat at the counter and ordered the cheapest thing I could find, a side of fries, trying to stretch my limited funds. The server, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Maria, brought my order, and then paused, studying my face. "You doing okay, honey?" she asked, her voice soft. "You look like you've had a rough day." I tried to smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "I'm fine. Just tired." She didn't push, but a few minutes later, she came back with a chocolate milkshake I hadn't ordered. "On the house," she said with a little wink. "Whatever's going on, a little sugar and chocolate can't hurt." Her small act of kindness almost broke me. I managed to thank her through the lump that had formed in my throat and slowly sipped the milkshake while I scrolled through the contacts on my phone, searching for anyone, absolutely anyone, who could help. The list of possibilities was heartbreakingly short. Most of my old friends had drifted away after we moved, and I hadn't made any real friends in Mark's fancy neighborhood. I sent a text to two of my mom's old friends, women who had been in our lives before Mark. One didn't answer. The other replied with a quick message saying she was out of the country. It seemed like when my mom jettisoned her old life, she'd left her old friends behind just as thoroughly as she'd left our little apartment and our budget-friendly groceries. As I scrolled, one name jumped out at me, making my heart pound. Dad. I hadn't spoken to him in over 3 years. Our last conversation was a short, awkward call on my 12th birthday. After that, he just vanished. My mom had always insinuated that he just wasn't interested, that he had a new life and a new family that were his priority now. "Your father's moved on, Chloe," she'd say with a shrug whenever I asked about him. "Some men just aren't cut out to be parents." I stared at his contact info, my thumb hovering over the call button. What if he rejected me, too? What if my mom was right and he wanted nothing to do with me? The thought of facing that second abandonment was almost more than I could bear. I retreated to the airport bathroom, locking myself in a stall for a sliver of privacy. I tried to rehearse what I would say. "Hi, Dad, it's Chloe. I know it's been a while." No, too casual. "Hello, this is Chloe. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm in a lot of trouble." Better, but it still didn't feel right. In the end, pure desperation won. With a trembling finger, I pressed call and held my breath as it rang. Once, twice, 3 times. I was just about to hang up when a deep voice answered. "Hello?" The sound of his voice, so familiar and yet so strange after all this time, stole my own. "Hello, is anyone there?" he asked again. "Dad?" I finally managed to squeak out, my voice small and shaky. There was a beat of silence and then, "Chloe? Sweetheart, is that really you?" The immediate warmth and concern in his voice was the key that unlocked everything. "Dad, I need help," I sobbed, and then the entire story came tumbling out in a messy, incoherent rush of words. The remarriage, the move, the airport, the $300. By the time I was done, I was gasping for air between sobs. "She left you at the airport? Alone?" His voice had changed. The initial shock was replaced by a hard, cold edge. "Where are you? Which airport?" I told him, half expecting him to offer to call social services or maybe wire me some money for a taxi. "Stay exactly where you are," he said, his tone firm and commanding. "I'm coming to get you myself. It's going to take me about 3 hours to get there. Can you stay safe until then?" You're coming here?" I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. "You don't have to do that. Maybe you could just help me figure out how to get home." "Chloe," he interrupted gently but firmly, "I am coming to get you. Find the customer service desk for the airline your mother was flying. Tell them what happened. I'm going to call them right now and make sure they take care of you until I arrive." After we hung up, I just sat there in the bathroom stall for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. My father, the man I'd been led to believe had completely forgotten about me, was dropping everything and driving 3 hours to come to my rescue. It felt too good to be true. A lifetime of disappointment had made me deeply suspicious of hope. Still, I did what he said. I walked up to the airline's customer service desk, my heart pounding. To my complete shock, the staff was instantly kind and understanding. They ushered me into a private lounge area, brought me a sandwich and a bottle of water, and promised they would stay with me until my father got there. Unfortunately, this happens more often than you'd think, the customer service manager told me quietly. Parents changing their minds at the last minute, leaving their kids stranded. The 3-hour wait was both agonizingly long and strangely surreal. I oscillated between hope, anxiety, and pure exhaustion. What if he didn't show? What if he came but was angry about being dragged into my drama? What if this was all just a setup for an even bigger rejection? My tired mind drifted back to the few, faded memories I had of him from before the divorce. Him teaching me to ride my bike, his steady hand on the back of the seat, him reading me bedtime stories, doing a different funny voice for each character. One Christmas morning when he built me a dollhouse from a kit, his face lighting up with pride when he saw my excitement. If he loved me then, why did he disappear? Why didn't he ever fight for me? The question spun around and around in my exhausted brain. Just as I was starting to drift off in the uncomfortable chair, a voice came over the lounge's private intercom. "Attention, a Ms. Chloe Evans. Please come to the information desk." My heart shot into my throat. I grabbed my little suitcase and followed an airline employee who had come to get me. But instead of taking me back out to the main terminal, she led me through a series of quiet corridors and security doors until we reached what looked like a private executive terminal. "Your father arranged to meet you here," the employee explained as we approached a set of glass doors that opened directly onto the tarmac. And that's when I saw it. A sleek, white, private jet with a staircase descending from its open door. And walking down those stairs was a tall man in a dark suit. His profile, so familiar, made my breath catch in my throat. My father looked different than I remembered. His dark hair was now threaded with silver at the temples, and he moved with a kind of easy confidence I didn't recall from my childhood. But his eyes, when they met mine across the tarmac, were exactly the same, kind and crinkled at the corners. For a long moment, we just stood there taking each other in. Then he strode forward, closing the distance between us in a few long steps. He stopped just short of me, a deep uncertainty etched on his face. "Chloe," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe it's really you." I didn't know what to say, what to do. Part of me, the little girl who used to run to greet him at the door, wanted to throw my arms around him. But another part, the wounded 16-year-old who felt abandoned by everyone, held back. He seemed to sense my hesitation. "I'm so sorry," he said softly, "for all of it. For not being there, for not fighting harder." Something in the raw sincerity of his voice shattered my defenses. The tears I thought I'd run out of hours ago came back with a vengeance. "She told me you didn't want me anymore," I choked out. "She said you'd moved on." His face darkened. That was never true. Not for one single day. He slowly opened his arms, and this time I didn't hesitate. I stepped into his embrace and let out years of pent-up sorrow and confusion against his shoulder. We stood like that for what felt like a long time. When we finally pulled apart, he kept an arm wrapped around my shoulders and guided me toward the plane. "Let's get you out of here," he said gently. "We can talk on the way." The inside of the jet was like something out of a movie. Plush cream leather seats, polished wood trim, and soft, warm lighting. A flight attendant greeted us with a kind smile and offered me a drink and a snack. As we settled into seats facing each other, I couldn't help but stare. Is this your plane?" He smiled a little sheepishly. "The company's, technically. I'm the CEO of Apex Dynamics now." "CEO?" I echoed, stunned. My mother had always painted him as a financial failure, barely scraping by. "It's been a good few years," he said simply, then leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "Chloe, I need you to understand something. I have been trying to reach you for years. Birthday cards, Christmas presents, phone calls, letters, everything. When your mother remarried and moved, I lost all contact. I hired private investigators, but they couldn't find a new address. I filed motions in court that just seemed to disappear into a black hole. My mind was reeling as the truth of what he was saying began to sink in. She kept you from me. On purpose. He nodded, pain clear in his eyes. I've been sending child support payments and extra funds every single month since the divorce. Money that I'm guessing you never saw. I thought about the thrift store clothes, the nights we ate instant ramen for dinner, my mother's constant complaining about how broke we were. We were always broke, I whispered. She said you barely paid anything. My father opened his briefcase and pulled out a sleek tablet, handing it to me. He swiped through a file, and there it was. Scanned copies of cashed checks, court filings, screenshots of emails and call logs, all meticulously organized by date. The undeniable proof of his efforts and my mother's lies. I'm not showing you this to hurt you, he said softly, but you deserve to know the truth. As the jet lifted off, carrying me away from the airport that had been the scene of my deepest humiliation, I felt a strange sense of lightness, as if I were shedding years of lies and manipulation with every foot we climbed. My father explained that he now lived in San Francisco, running the tech company he'd co-founded right after their divorce. What started as a small venture had exploded into a major player in the industry, bringing him a level of success he'd never imagined. I kept your room ready, he said, a touch of embarrassment in his voice. All these years, just in case. The flight went by in a blur as we started the slow, careful work of getting to know each other again. There were awkward silences and moments of overwhelming emotion, but beneath it all there was a current of real connection that felt both brand new and deeply familiar. When we landed, a car was waiting on the tarmac to take us to his home. I pressed my face against the window as we drove through beautiful, hilly neighborhoods, finally turning onto a private road that wound its way up a cliffside. The house that appeared was breathtaking, a modern masterpiece of glass and stone, perched on a cliff with a panoramic view of the ocean and the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. "Home sweet home," my father said, watching my reaction. "I hope you'll like it here." A kind woman named Linda greeted us at the door. I tensed up for a second, wondering if this was his wife, but he quickly introduced her as his executive assistant who had helped get everything ready for my arrival. "I've prepared the guest suite for Chloe," she told my father. "Fresh linens, stocked the bathroom, and I put some groceries in the kitchen. The security team has also been updated to include her." My father thanked her, and she left with a warm smile in my direction. He then gave me a tour of the house. When we got to what he called the guest suite, my new room, I stopped dead in the doorway, completely overwhelmed. The walls were painted a soft, calming gray, and a huge window looked out over the Pacific. There was a queen-sized bed piled high with soft pillows, a sleek desk, and a comfy reading chair by the window. But it was the items arranged on the dresser that made my throat close up. "Are those—" I moved closer, unable to finish the sentence. My father nodded, his expression full of a tender sadness. "Birthday and Christmas presents. For every year I couldn't find you. I couldn't send them, but I couldn't stand not to get them." There they were, a row of beautifully wrapped gifts, arranged by year. Beside them was a photo album with a simple label, Chloe. With trembling fingers, I opened it. It was filled with the few photos he'd managed to get of me over the years, old school pictures my mom must have sent in the beginning, a newspaper clipping of me winning a science fair award in middle school, even a blurry, long-distance photo of me leaving my old school that he must have hired someone to take. "You really did try to stay in my life," I whispered, the reality of it finally breaking through the wall of lies my mother had built. "Every single day," he replied, his voice hoarse, "and I'm not going anywhere now." "Not if you'll let me be your dad again." That first night, we ate takeout sitting on the deck, neither of us up to the task of cooking. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt seen. I felt heard. As I finally climbed into the impossibly comfortable bed in my new room, my last thought before sleep took me was that maybe being abandoned at the airport wasn't the end of my story. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning. I woke the next morning feeling disoriented, the unfamiliar softness of the bed and the distant sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below, confusing me. Then, the whirlwind of the previous day came rushing back. I sat up, taking in the room in the bright morning light. It was even more beautiful than I'd realized. After a shower in the ensuite bathroom, which had a rainfall shower head and more fancy soaps than I'd ever seen, I put on my clothes from yesterday and went downstairs. I found my father in the kitchen, attempting to make pancakes with very little success. "Good morning," he said, looking up with a sheepish grin as he gestured at the lopsided blob in the pan. I thought I'd make breakfast, but it appears my culinary skills haven't improved. The memory surfaced instantly. Sunday mornings from my childhood, when he'd make misshapen pancakes while my mom slept in. "I remember your pancakes," I said, hopping onto a stool at the kitchen island. "You used to make smiley faces on them with chocolate chips." His face lit up. "You remember that?" "Some things you don't forget," I replied, accepting the slightly burnt but delicious pancake he offered me. The simple act of sharing breakfast felt so normal, it helped chip away at the years of awkwardness between us. Later that day, he said, "I have some people I'd like you to meet if you're up to it." An hour later, I was sitting across from an elegant, sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Eleanor Vance, a family law attorney. "What your mother did, Chloe, is legally defined as child abandonment," she explained, her tone professional, yet kind. "Leaving a minor stranded without any provision for her care is against the law, and that's before we even get to the financial misconduct regarding the child support payments." I shifted in my chair, suddenly uncomfortable. "I don't want to get my mom in trouble. You just want to be safe," Eleanor finished for me. "I understand. But to ensure that, we need to establish legal protections for you, especially if you want to stay here with your father." My dad, who had been listening quietly, leaned forward. "Chloe, this is your choice. But I want you to know I'm ready to file for full custody, if that's what you want." The thought was both terrifying and incredibly freeing. Can I really choose? "You're 16, Eleanor said. "The court gives significant weight to the preference of a minor your age, especially in a clear-cut case of abandonment like this." After the lawyer left, my dad took me to his home office and showed me the digital files he had meticulously kept. There were the court filings for visitation, call logs showing unanswered calls to my mom, even emails to my old school that had mysteriously never been passed on to me. "She threatened me with a restraining order if I tried to contact you directly," he explained, showing me a scanned letter from my mother's lawyer dated 3 years prior. "She claimed I was harassing you and causing you emotional distress." Each new piece of evidence was another brick removed from the wall of lies my mother had built, revealing a landscape of deliberate, calculated separation. "Why would she do all this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I think it was complicated." My father sighed. "When we divorced, I was struggling. My first company had failed. I think when my situation improved so dramatically, it was easier for her to stick to the story that I was an absent, deadbeat dad than to explain to her new, wealthy husband why she'd kept us apart for so long. 2 days after I arrived, my mother finally called. I stared at her name on the screen, a storm of anger and hurt and confusion paralyzing me. "You don't have to answer that," my dad said gently. The call went to voicemail. A minute later, a message notification popped up. With a deep breath, I put the phone on speaker. "Chloe, honey, it seems there's been a huge misunderstanding." My mother's voice was sickeningly bright and cheerful. "I thought you knew the plan was for you to have a little independence while we were gone. Mark thought it would be good for you. I didn't abandon you, sweetie. That's such an awful word. Call me so we can sort this out. The Wi-Fi here is terrible, but I'll check for your call. Love you." The blatant gaslighting made my stomach clench. There was no plan. There was no discussion. She had deserted me and was now trying to make me believe I had imagined it all. "Classic," my dad muttered, shaking his head. "She hasn't changed a bit." I didn't call back. Instead, with my dad and Eleanor's support, I made my decision. I was staying in San Francisco. The legal process began to move forward. With the legal wheels in motion, my dad focused on the practical. You need clothes, a computer for school, things for your room, he said. Let's go shopping. That trip was surreal. I was so used to secondhand stores and clearance racks, but my dad just kept telling me to pick out whatever I liked, ignoring the price tags. I came home with a whole new wardrobe, a laptop, and a new phone. That night, as we sat on the deck watching the fog roll in over the bay, we had our first real deep talk about the past. "Why did you and Mom really break up?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time. "The simple answer," he finally said, "is that we wanted different things. Your mom craved financial security and status above everything. When my first business failed, she saw me as a failure. She couldn't handle the uncertainty. And you," I prompted. "I wanted a partner," he said, his eyes sad. "Someone who would ride out the storms with me, not jump ship at the first sign of choppy water. I never wanted to leave you, Chloe. Your mother used custody as a weapon, slowly cutting me out until there was nothing left." A week after I arrived in San Francisco, Eleanor suggested it was time to go back and get my things from my mother's house. She would still be in Fiji for another week, giving us a perfect window to enter the house legally, since I was still an official resident, and collect my belongings without a confrontation. "You don't have to go," my dad said. "I can go with the legal team." But I knew I had to do it. It was a necessary final step. "I want to go," I said firmly. 3 days before my mom was due back, my dad, Eleanor, her assistant, and I flew back. Using the key I still had, I opened the front door to the eerily silent house. Walking back into that space felt disorienting. I noticed for the first time that all the framed photos were of Mark and his kids. My mom was in a few, but there were almost no pictures of me. "Where's your room?" my dad asked, his hand on my shoulder. I led him upstairs to the smallest bedroom at the far end of the hall. He stopped in the doorway, his voice full of disbelief. "This was your room?" He took in the plain furniture and bare walls. "It's fine," I said automatically, the old defensive reflex kicking in. He looked at me, his expression full of pain. "No, sweetheart. It's not fine. You deserved so much more." As movers we'd hired began packing, I started clearing out my desk. In the back of a drawer, I found a small box of keepsakes, a few photos from before the divorce, a couple of early birthday cards from my dad, and a tiny teddy bear he'd given me when I was 5. I showed them to him, and his eyes filled with tears. "You kept these." "I guess I never really believed you didn't care," I admitted. Then, in the back of my closet, behind a row of old shoes, I found it. A thick stack of envelopes held together with a rubber band. They were all addressed to me, in my father's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened the top one. It was a card for my 13th birthday, with a heartfelt message and an unspent gift card inside. One by one, I opened them. Cards for every single birthday and Christmas, a letter with his new address and phone number in San Francisco, a picture of him at his new office with a note saying he hoped I'd visit someday. "She kept all of these from me," I whispered, hot tears streaming down my face. "All this time? I thought you'd forgotten me." My dad pulled me into a hug, holding me tight. Never, not for one single day. As the movers finished up, I walked into my mother's home office. Eleanor had said any personal documents related to me were mine to take. In a file labeled divorce, I found it all. The financial statements showing child support deposits far larger than she'd ever admitted to, all going into a secret bank account. The court documents showing my dad's petitions for visitation, all blocked by my mom. And the most damning thing of all, a draft of a letter to her attorney, written right after she met Mark. It outlined a strategy to minimize the father's influence and referred to me as a complication that needed to be carefully managed. By late afternoon, everything was packed. I sat down at my now empty desk and wrote the letter I'd been composing in my head. Dear Mom, it began. I poured out all the years of hurt and betrayal, telling her I knew everything, the letters, the money, the lies. I'm choosing to live with Dad now, I wrote at the end. Not for revenge, but because I deserve to be somewhere I'm wanted. I hope you understand the damage you've caused. Despite everything, I don't hate you, but I have to love myself enough to leave. I left the letter and my house key on the stripped mattress of my old bed. Walking out of that house for the last time, I didn't look back. I looked forward. My mother got back from Fiji 3 days later. My phone exploded with a predictable cycle of messages. Where are you? Why is your room empty? Call me now. Chloe, this isn't funny. You come home this instant. I just spoke to your father's lawyer. How could you do this to me after everything I've done for you? Please come home, sweetie. We can fix this. I miss you. I showed them to my father and Eleanor, who advised me not to respond. A week later, my mother showed up at my father's house. The security system buzzed and we saw her on the monitor, standing at the gate. You don't have to see her, my dad said, but I knew I did. I'll talk to her, I said, but I want you and Eleanor here with me. When we opened the door, her face was a mask of relief and outrage. Chloe, thank God, she cried, moving to hug me. I took a step back. What is going on? Why are you with him? The venom in that last word was palpable. We sat in the living room, and my mother's composure began to crumble as her eyes darted around the expensive space. So that's what this is about, she said with a brittle laugh. He bought you. That's not why I'm here, I said, my voice shaking. I'm here because you abandoned me. I'm here because you lied to me about Dad for years. I'm here because I found the letters. Her face hardened. You went through my things? How dare you? They were addressed to me, I shot back. I was protecting you, she insisted, from his broken promises. My father finally spoke, his voice dangerously calm. There were no broken promises, Laura, only your lies. You have no right to judge me, she shrieked. You were off becoming a millionaire while I raised her alone. I sent money every month, he replied evenly. Money you spent on yourself. This isn't about punishment, Eleanor interjected. This is about what's in Chloe's best interest. She has expressed a clear desire to live with her father, and given the circumstances, the court will honor that. My mother's anger finally broke, replaced by tears. Chloe, please, she sobbed. I made a mistake. I was scared. But you can't leave me for him. We're family. We stopped being a family when you decided Mark and his kids were more important than me, I said quietly. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I challenged her. Help me understand why you would do it. She struggled for a moment, then whispered the truth. Richard, he thought it would be better if you stayed home. I was afraid of losing him. So you chose him over me. The raw honesty of it was more painful than all the lies. I chose security, she countered. He offered us a better life. He offered you a better life, I corrected her. I was just excess baggage. Just then, the front door burst open and Mark strode in, his face livid. Laura, I told you not to come here. Get in the car. As my mother stood to obey, I called out, Is this what you want, Mom? Someone who treats you like a child? She hesitated, but Mark grabbed her arm. The car, Laura. Now. And I watched her walk away from me all over again. But this time, I wasn't the one being left behind. The months that followed were a period of intense healing and adjustment. I started therapy with a woman named Dr. Sharma, who helped me untangle the complex knot of anger, grief, and guilt I was feeling. Healing isn't linear, Chloe, she told me, and your mother's actions are a reflection of her own limitations, not your worth. My father enrolled me in a great private school, and to my surprise, I started making real friends for the first time in years. There were Noah and Isla, twins who shared my love for books, and Ben, a talented artist who encouraged my own clumsy attempts at sketching. I was slowly learning to trust again. Rebuilding my relationship with my father was a delicate process of rediscovery. We had so many years to make up for. "I wish I'd been there for your first crush," he said one night, and I surprised myself by comforting him. "We can't get those years back," I told him, "but we have now." 6 months later, the court awarded my father full legal custody. The judge ordered my mother to repay the child support she'd stolen and established a strict visitation schedule that could only begin after we attended joint therapy sessions. The first few sessions were brutal. My mother swung between tearful apologies and trying to frame her abandonment as a misguided attempt to please Mark. But over time, I established firm boundaries. I would not pretend the past didn't happen. I would not allow her to rewrite history to make herself feel better. And slowly, she began to accept it. High school graduation came and went. I was the valedictorian, and my father beamed with pride in the front row. My mother sat a few rows back, a quiet observer. College took me to the East Coast, where I studied psychology and family law. The distance gave me the space to become my own person, separate from my parents' drama. I ended up working for a nonprofit that helps children navigate high-conflict divorces, using my own story to help others. The journey to forgiveness was a long one. Forgiveness, as Dr. Sharma once said, doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means you're choosing not to let it define your future. On my 25th birthday, I wrote my mom a letter. "I've learned that people can only give what they have inside them to give." I wrote, "And I've realized your capacity for unconditional love was damaged long before I ever came along." Her reply was short, but it was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. "You deserved a better mother than I was capable of being. I'm sorry for that every day." When I got married at 28, my father walked me down the aisle, tears in his eyes. My mother was there too, with a new partner. She watched from a distance, a quiet guest at the life I had built not because of her, but in spite of her. The abandonment at the airport, which once felt like the end of my world, is now just one chapter in a much longer, richer story. In a strange way, being left behind was the very thing that propelled me forward, forcing me to find a strength I never knew I had and leading me to the unwavering love of the father I thought I had lost forever. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to my channel for more stories about resilience and finding your own path, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that our deepest wounds don't have to define us. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with a family member? I'd love to read your experiences in the comments. Remember, your story is important, and you are never as alone as you might feel.